In a world full of monsters, giants, fishmen, minks, all with incredibly impressive powers, samurai, ninja, bloodlusted freaks of nature with intimidating devil fruit abilities, in a world where one can become a dragon, a dinosaur, a phoenix, or even a god or deity, today we are going to talk about a simple man, a normal-sized human being who is pacifistic in nature, with no devil fruit whatsoever, and only his lesser dominant arm to carry around with him. And I'm going to tell you exactly why he is the absolute strongest in the world of One Piece. Ladies and gentlemen, today we talk about why Shanks is top 1. Now, to understand Shanks, we must first understand shonen, as One Piece is a shonen manga, and more importantly, we must understand the author of this manga, Eiichiro Oda, and how he writes a long-term story. Now, Oda, shonen in general, is huge on introducing characters in the beginning and hiding their powers and saving them for later and later and later on in the story for big surprises and just how powerful they are. With us seeing them first earlier on, maybe in the first few chapters, in the first 10, 20, 30 chapters, and not having any idea. We know that they are strong, but we have no idea just how strong they really are until way down the line, depending on how long the manga, the certain manga or the certain anime goes. This is typical with shonen. We've seen this so many times, and in my opinion, no one does this better than Eiichiro Oda himself, the author of One Piece, where he, being the author, one of the longest running manga in history, he is huge on saving characters from early on and showing us them way later down the line. We see this with Dragon, with Mihawk, with Shanks, of course, with some of the Yonko from the time of their introduction to the time we actually see them fight, and so many others. In the case of Mihawk, where he even shows us Mihawk very early on in the series and straight up tells us that the next time we're actually going to see Mihawk fight for real is basically going to be the end of the story, with him telling Zoro he's going to wait for Zoro. We knew right then and there that we're not really going to see Mihawk until the end of the story. This is Oda's way of writing, and personally I am a big fan of it because I've always been a fan of longer term story writing. I tend to invest more in those than in the short term ones because to me it is a bigger investment, and I don't mind reading 2 or 3 very long manga series as opposed to 10 or 15 very short ones. However, it has to be done right for this to work. Now, let's talk about Shanks. Shanks was introduced in chapter 1, right after Luffy was introduced. In the very next page, we see, I think maybe, I don't know exactly when, probably the 3rd or 4th page of the entire manga of One Piece. Right after we see Luffy and we get the introduction and we discover Luffy's name, the next page we get Shanks and we learn who Shanks is. Now, in this chapter, of course, any One Piece fan knows Shanks has a devil fruit. Luffy eats a devil fruit on accident. Shanks saves Luffy. Shanks gets his arm cut off. Shanks gives Luffy the straw hat, and Shanks tells Luffy, the next time I see you, bring me back this hat when you are a great pirate. So from there, it's similar to the situation with Mihawk, where we get a clear understanding that maybe if we do see Shanks again, or if we don't, we understand that we are not going to see a reunion between Luffy and Shanks until Luffy is a great enough pirate to return the straw hat back to Shanks. And until then, they will not meet. With this solidified, we get one last page of one last panel of Shanks and his crew shipping off to sea, and he's gone for a lot of chapters. Now, this is something Oda does consistently, and if we look at this and we understand what we see from Shanks after this, because when we look here, no one really thought too much of Shanks. We just thought, okay, he is a character. We know he is important to the story, but we don't know how strong he is. Now, when Garp is introduced in Post Enies Lobby, he talks to us about the Yonko system and the 4 Yonko. And the whole reason he brings this up is because him and Luffy are talking about Shanks. And he tells us that the Yonko are the 4 most powerful pirates on the seas. Now, With power, it can be many different things. It does not necessarily mean they are the 4 individual strongest characters. However, they are very strong, and they are the 4 most powerful units in the seas. This is the first time we actually are surprised and get to understand just how strong Shanks truly is. And in a shonen, especially a shonen written by Ichiro Oda, where you are being saved from chapter 1, and we are currently in chapter 1057, waiting for chapter 1058, and we have yet to see Shanks go all out or to even see a little bit of Shanks. It's insane. That is absolutely insane. And he is a character who has a lot of emphasis in the story. If we talk about the importance of Shanks, I can name on just my right hand, I can count on my right hand the amount of characters who are more important and pivotal, who play a more pivotal role to the actual story and the way One Piece works than Shanks. And besides Luffy, maybe a Zoro, a Roger, a Joy Boy, there's pretty much no one else, and a Blackbeard. Other than that, no one else really holds the importance that the character of Shanks plays. And when I talk about importance, I don't necessarily mean he is more important as in if one had to die between Shanks or Nami or Shanks and Sanji. We know Shanks will die. We know those are the Straw Hats. They are the backbone, the foundation, the heart, and the soul of this manga that we all love. But if you take them away, if you take away Nami from the story as an entire whole doesn't go away. We just take Nami's story from the slot and take it out. With Shanks, if we take Shanks out of the picture, the entire story of One Piece gets dramatically changed, because Shanks is the in-between from the first Pirate King and the future Pirate King. He is the literal reason One Piece is happening, because he is the inspiration for Luffy to become a pirate. More so than Goldie Roger, more so than Whitebeard, more so than all these guys. Shanks is the reason that Luffy decided he wanted to become a pirate captain and he wanted to become king of the pirates and surpass everybody, was because of Shanks. Sitting down with Shanks and his crew at the bar every day as a young, impressionable kid, he was heavily influenced by Shanks, and this started the entire journey that we know as One Piece. And in over 1,000 chapters, we have still seen barely anything of Shanks. And Oda is a very particular writer, if nothing else. Anything he does for a very specific reason. And Oda has been very careful about avoiding showing us Shanks in combat, and would rather show us all of the admirals and all of the Yonko before he shows us Shanks. Where we stand right now, since the introduction of Shanks, we have gotten the introduction of 5 admirals, the showings of 5 admirals in full-on fights, the introduction of Kaido the Yonko Big Mom, Yonko Whitebeard. We got to see Whitebeard go all out and die. Kaido and Big Mom go all out and lose. And all of this came after Shanks' introduction and before Shanks actually even gets a little bit of a fight. We get to see all of these characters enter the story, go all out, and exit the story. What do you think that's telling us right there? What do you think Oda is trying to tell us? Or not even tell us, but what do you think Oda is doing on his own by doing this? By taking one character and just giving us a little, here you go, his name is Shanks, pull him back, give us everybody else in their entirety, their flashbacks, their fights, their devil fruit powers, their awakenings, their secret abilities, their wins, their losses, their backstory, and then take them out of the story. And Shanks is still there. This is huge, and this is what I call portrayal, and to me this is a big reason why I believe Shanks has the absolute best portrayal in One Piece. So if you guys are liking the video so far, why not go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps me go a long way in making these videos, so please subscribe. But another part I want to mention about this is Shanks' personality along with his portrayal. Now, we just talked about Shanks' portrayal and how he is being saved. We just got a little bit into that. Now let's talk about his personality. So we get the introduction of Whitebeard. He is the world's strongest man. We get the introduction of Mihawk. He is the world's strongest swordsman. We get the introduction of Kaido, and he is rumored or said to be the world's strongest creature. Now, these are men who are talked about all over the world. These are men, especially Kaido, who have earned their reputation through fear and intimidation and through conquering, because Kaido has conquered. He tends to beat up pirate captains and their crews and take the captains and make them subordinates, lower subordinates of his own crew. So he is a conqueror by now. He conquered Wano. He conquered Oden. And because of this, it is a lot easier for him to gain a reputation and for his name to spread across the world. It's just like in real life. The more you do, the more active you are, the more people are going to hear about you, right? But with Shanks, Shanks's personality is something that really, really matters when you talk about his power scaling, believe it or not. Because Shanks is extremely pacifistic in nature. He's extremely laid back. He is fun. He's outgoing. He laughs. He doesn't take himself so seriously. And this isn't just something about Shanks. This is the main thing about Shanks that Oda decided to introduce to us in Chapter 1. If there is one thing in Chapter 1 Oda wanted to make very clear to us about Shanks, all you would have to do is go back to that one line that Shanks said to the bandits, where he said, you guys can spill water all over me. You can joke around on me, whatever, laugh at me, throw bottles around, whatever you want to do, embarrass me, make me look like a complete fool, and I will just laugh it off. But the moment you mess with somebody I care about, you're going to see the real me that you would never thought was there, because I'm not the kind of guy to show that to you. And the fact that Higuma had an 8 million berry bounty and was flexing that on Shanks, and Shanks had a 4 billion and 48 million berry bounty. And at that time, he had a 1.04 billion berry bounty. And Higuma had no idea, and Shanks doesn't even care. This is Shanks' mindset in the world. So take this mindset of Shanks and add it to him in the world of One Piece, because that's his character. And Oda decided to tell us this above all else about Shanks in Chapter 1. Not his power, not his crew, or like what he's gained, his backstory. His personality is what we got from him. And you have to keep this in mind, because they say Kaido is the world's strongest creature. They say this about all these people. But Shanks is not the kind of man to chase any kind of glory whatsoever. This is a man who could have saw the One Piece and at 12 years old and could have became the Pirate King probably right after Roger died, knowing exactly where to go and what to do, but hasn't. He's the kind of guy who just likes to sit down in random deserted islands in the middle of nowhere with his crew, just drinking sake, getting drunk out of their minds, having a party all the way till the morning, and having a good time laughing. We saw this with Mihawk when Mihawk went to go visit him. This is his personality. And because of this, it is very easy for someone else to go out there and just use their strength to take over all these places like Kaido, a man who is very big, larger than life. He's energetic. He's very loud, physically loud and verbally loud. And it's hard to go through the world without hearing about Kaido in the newspapers. It's easy to go through the world without hearing about Shanks. But when Shanks does make a move, all eyes are on him. All eyes across the world are on him. It's like that one person you always know that doesn't talk a lot, but when they do talk, everybody listens because of how rarely they talk. Shanks is kind of like that, but his talking is with his actions. And because of this, I believe he is the strongest. This is part of the reason. And Oda is very particular with his words. So if we look at Kaido, he is never, ever once confirmed to be anything. His only confirmed epithet is King of the Beasts or 100 Beast Kaido. Anytime the world's strongest creature has ever come up, if it had came up from the narrator, it was he is said to be. And if it came up from people, it was either he's said to be, or it is people just saying it as like killer, as that is his own individual experience. Because the narrator had never said it. The narrator was very careful to say he is said to be the world's strongest creature. And this is what I mean when I say Oda is very, very particular. Mihawk, he is the world's strongest swordsman. No debate about that. We get that in Baratier. However, in an SBS, when a fan asks Ichiro Oda, what is the name of Shanks' sword? I believe that was the question. He says the sword's name is Griffin. And then he goes on to add, when nobody asked him, but how does Shanks really fight? And he leaves it at that. Again, this is Oda. This is exactly what Oda does. He has teased these kinds of things throughout the story in SBSs many, many times. When we found out about the Hito no Mi, we went back to an interview and we found out he basically was teasing this to us years ago. We look at the latest chapter, chapter 1058, New Emperor. We get the bounties of Crocodile, we get the bounty of Buggy, and more importantly, we also get the bounties of all the Straw Hats, but most importantly, in that chapter, what we all remember, what we're all going to take from it, we got the bounty of Dracula Mihawk. What did they say? They said Dracula Mihawk is the world's strongest swordsman, and then they went on to say, or right before that, they said, he even has greater sword skill than the Red Hair Emperor. Now, why would they say sword skill? And this has been translated. This is the official translation as well. Sword skill is very specific. They're saying he has greater sword skill. We know he is the world's greatest swordsman. We already know this. So we know he is superior in swordsmanship to Shanks. We know that Oda deliberately withdrew from saying Shanks is a swordsman. We know Oda he likes his words, and he likes to make us think one thing only to take it away from us. Why would he say Mihawk is superior in skill when he can, not even just as easily, he can easier say Mihawk, the swordsman who was even greater than Shanks, or the man who was even greater than Shanks. He could have easily said that, but he deliberately did not say that. Take a moment, sit back, and ask yourself why. Why is it that a man that was introduced in chapter 1, who we have not seen fight when we've seen everybody else fight, we've seen the so-called strongest in the world, Kaido, fight and be defeated. We've seen all these people fight and be defeated. And then we look back and we find out, oh, Kaido was never really said to be the strongest. He was rumored to be the strongest. Mihawk was never really said to be greater than strength. His greater than Shanks. His sword skill was greater than Shanks. Shanks is being saved because he is above these men. He is above Mihawk. He is above Kaido. He's above all of them. And Oda is trying to make us look one way so that later on in the story he can be psych and point us that way. That's what he wants to do. I believe some of us are falling for it and some of us are not. And I'm not falling for it. I think Shanks is the strongest. Hey guys, so as I was editing the video, I realized that I missed the main point I was trying to add. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. Basically, with everything I just said about his character and everything that went on in chapter 1, keep in mind that Oda loves to do things in a smaller portion and then do them in a much grander scale later on in the series. We see this with the Romance Dawn arc and how generally it portrays the entire journey of the Grand Line in the New World, with each arc in the Romance Dawn being just a smaller and lesser version of a major arc we see in the New World. And basically, my main point here is that this is exactly what's happening with Shanks in chapter 1. Oda knew he had only one chapter, the first chapter, and perhaps the longest chapter in the entire series, to introduce to us Shanks, and he knew that he only had this chapter to get across the main point he wanted us to learn about Shanks that would stick with us through the whole journey. And he chose the story and the incident with the bandits and what we could learn from Shanks through that. And what we did learn with Shanks is that Shanks is a guy who will let people flex on him, who will let people show off and do this just to stroke their own ego, and he will sit back quietly and laugh it off. But only if and only when it involves hurting his friends or hurting him deeply will he show you the real him. And the real him tends to be above all else and everyone else, to where Oda fooled Luffy, and through Luffy he also fooled us into thinking Shanks was just this punk who couldn't handle the bandits and who couldn't handle these guys. And just for him at the end of the chapter to show us what Shanks was really about, and that he was the guy on that island and no one else was even on his level. And basically what I'm saying is, I think just like how Oda takes segments from the Romance Dawn arc and shows us this in larger, more intense scales throughout the story, Shanks' story here with the bandits is a smaller version of Shanks' story in the entire world of One Piece, where Higuma and the bandits are basically the admirals and the Yonko and everyone else, and the 8 million berry bounty that we saw that he was flexing on Shanks is basically the impressive feats that we've seen from Blackbeard, from Big Mom, from Kaido's, from Mihawk, from Admirals, that we think is almost impossible to top and that we have not seen anyone top yet. And again, Oda has fooled us with Shanks in chapter 1, and I think he wants to see if we're going to fall for this same trick again, or if we're going to learn that one lesson that he wanted to show us above all else in chapter 1 to take away about Shanks, and apply it to Shanks throughout the entire series. That's my main point here. So anyways, back to the video. Now, number 3, let's talk about Kaido's top 5. So, along with Shanks' portrayal and his personality, I mentioned earlier how Kaido is the one who gets all the glitz, the glamour. He intimidates everyone. He's on the newspapers. He is said to be the strongest. Killer is saying it. Kid is saying it. The narrator is saying he is said to be. And everybody's afraid of Kaido. But then we look at Kaido, and when he fought Luffy and he took that red rock, what did we see? We saw him envisioning Luffy at his peak. The main character of the story at his absolute peak, and he had 5 men behind him. He had Oden. Now, some of you would say Oden isn't really that strong. I disagree, but even if I do, for argument's sake, the issue with Oden is Oden died very young. We didn't get to see Oden at his peak. So Kaido is not comparing himself currently to Oden. He's comparing the Kaido that he was at that time to Oden and comparing him in that fight. And in that fight, he knew that Oden was a superior. And that's part of the reason why he was extremely angry that the fight got interrupted. He wanted to see the end result. And Kaido's not afraid to lose. He's not afraid to die. So because of that fight, he has immense respect for Oden. Where he does not seem to have that respect for Big Mom, because he fought 3 days with Big Mom. She's standing right there and he does not even acknowledge her. That means he does not think Big Mom can beat him. He thought Oden would beat him in that moment. And truthfully, I think Oden would have. We see Whitebeard, we see Rocks, and we see the Pirate King Goldie Roger. I think these 3 go without saying. I don't really need to get into detail. These are the 3 strongest characters in One Piece. I think most people would agree with that. They are the top of the top, and they are the standard. And we see him talk about Whitebeard and Roger countless times during the Wano arc and the raid. When he was on the roof with the Scabbards, he mentions them. We know Kaido sees Roger and Whitebeard as peak pirates, and he almost admires some characteristics and traits about them. Now, among these 4 dead legends, I should say, Oden, Rocks, Whitebeard, and Roger, there is one more. And who is that one more directly behind Luffy? It's the only living one among them, and it is red-haired Shanks. Now, Kaido is said to have fought many people. He's said to have been captured many times. He is a Yonko. He is 59 years old, and we see in his flashback he loves to fight. He thinks strength is the way in life. So you can't tell me Kaido does not have his fair share of experience with the world's strongest fighters. He definitely does. Now, if you want to say he may not have fought Mihawk, maybe. Who knows? He may not have fought a Akainu. I think, honestly, Akainu's name shouldn't even come up here. But even if it does, for the sake of argument, Kaido's been captured many times. And he has been captured by the Marines. And for him to be captured by the Marines, he is only going to be captured by the Marines' best. So the fact that he has fought the Marines' best, we also know this because of God Valley. He has fought the tip-top of the Marines. And he does not have a single Marine there. There's your proof right there. Admirals would not make it. And we have Shanks, the only living one, comparable to Whitebeard, to Roger, and to Rocks, and to Oden, all in their prime. And to me, the way I see it, it's funny because Oda will show us what everyone else thinks. These people without the experience, like a Killer and a Supernova and people like this. And how they think Kaido is this epic, amazing #1, the best ever. And then he'll show us inside Kaido's head and how Kaido sees Shanks as that guy. And I would value Kaido's opinion of strength more than these other people's. Because he's been through it all. He's seen it all. And if he sees Shanks like this, to the point where he sees Luffy's peak being at Shanks, I think that says more about Shanks than words ever can. That one picture. And this is another big reason why I think Shanks is the strongest. Now, I want to talk about one of the very most important reasons that also ties us back to Kaido. So if we go back to later on in that fight, Luffy awakens, Sun God Nika. Kaido and Luffy are fighting. Actually, I think this might have been before Sun God Nika. I can't remember. Forgive me for this one. But some point towards the end of their fight, Kaido starts talking about Haki. And what does he say? He says Haki. He says you can master your double fruit, you can have the greatest double fruit abilities, but without Haki, it's nothing. Haki is the most important aspect. Once you reach that elite level, it's virtually all, if not all, mostly about Haki, where Haki is what's going to get you to Roger's level, not a devil fruit. And he specifically mentions how Roger did not have a devil fruit and conquered the world with Haki. And we know Roger was the best of his generation, along with Whitebeard. And for Roger to do this without Haki, it goes to show us that where Luffy is now, the way we've seen Devil Fruit awakenings, and Luffy already awakening his Devil Fruit, we've already touched that with Devil Fruits. We got to see it all with Devil Fruits. We got to see everything that there is, pretty much. Now, where Luffy is where we think we know about Haki, we're only just getting into it. And now, in the story, we're going to get into it. And we discover this through the downfall of Kaido, the world's strongest creature. Just before he falls, he tells Luffy, and through Luffy, he's mainly telling us the importance of Haki right before he falls. And who else is there? There is one man who was introduced in chapter 1, who let everyone else take their moment. He let Kaido have his entire moment, his 200 chapters of glory ever since he fell out of Sky Island. Everyone was saying Kaido top 1, Kaido top 1. And Kaido, before he falls, gives us the level of respect he has for Shanks, tells us, pretty much is telling the audience, beware of the Haki you're about to see from this point on, because Haki is what really matters. And he wouldn't say this to a Luffy who already has advanced Rio, advanced Conquerors Haki, and advanced observation Haki. He said this to a Luffy who had all 3 forms of advanced Haki, and he's lecturing Luffy on the importance of Haki. So he's basically telling Luffy, your Haki is not up to the standard to which it needs to be to talk about the Rogers of this world. So who do you think is going to show us later on that level of Haki that we're talking about? Who do you think? I'll sit back. I'll wait. I don't think it's Mihawk. I don't think it's the Admirals. I don't think it's Big Mom. I don't think it's Blackbeard. I think it's one man. The man who was saved from chapter 1, who again let everyone else have their turn and is just waiting patiently for his turn. I think Oda is making it clear as day to us. If we take a step back and we watch and we listen and we read the manga and we just listen to these little hints here and there, it's very clear to me that Shanks is the strongest by Portrayal and Portrayal alone. And when the feats come, it'll be very, very, very clear. Now, even with just Portrayal, let's take Portrayal aside. Now let's actually talk about feats. In chapter 1, Shanks introduced to us Conqueror's Haki. He was going to introduce it to us. He was the one to introduce to us Splitting the Sky with Whitebeard in chapter 434. In one of the latest chapters, chapter 1055, sorry, let me go back. In the same chapter with Whitebeard, he introduced, and to this day is the only one to damage physical objects with his Conqueror's Haki merely by walking by them. Just walking by them, he is damaging the ships of Yonko. And in chapter 1055, very recently, we see him pull off yet again, not only a unique feat, a unique Haki feat that only he has done, but I think it goes without saying, the absolute best Haki feat we have seen to date. And he didn't even touch his sword or a single weapon. He didn't even set foot on the island, and he scared away a Navy admiral from miles and miles and miles away. He froze him in fear, whatever you want to call it. Petrified him, paralyzed him, whatever. Haki talkie, whatever you want to call it. Green Bull was frozen from the Conqueror's Haki and was sweating. And he was able to communicate with Green Bull through his Conqueror's Haki that we can physically see traveling through the skies. Like it's almost like it's a tangible object. Like it's lightning. And he communicates with him and he pretty much tells him, honestly, to get lost, just like he told the Sea King in chapter 1. And then he leaves. Big Mom, Kaido, Admirals, all these people fight. And even now, where Kaido has fallen to Luffy, 1v1, he lost to Luffy. Shanks is near the island. He has the opportunity to meet Luffy. And remember what he said in chapter 1. When you are a great pirate, only when you are a great pirate, aka when you are on my level or as strong or stronger than me, come back and return this hat to me. And even now, he only just referred to Luffy as a great pirate. After it took Shanks needed to see Kaido lose to even be like, okay, now I can at least meet Luffy. Keep that in mind. And then he still leaves, meaning he is still being saved. I think it's very clear that Shanks is beyond what we've seen anything from anybody thus far. And with him having so many disadvantages, like I said in my introduction, with him having one arm, being a normal human, no devil fruit, and everyone else here, how can he even keep up with them? I didn't want to get into bounties. So to me, this is just, it's very clear to me that Shanks is the strongest through these things alone. And I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to end it here. However, I am going to make a part 2 about this because I do want to talk about his arrival at Marineford, and I want to make an entire video dedicated to just him at Marineford, because I want to introduce you guys to a new perspective on his introduction to Marineford and tell you guys why I believe, take everything else about Shanks that we know aside, just his part in Marineford alone almost guarantees us he is the strongest character in One Piece. And I'll tell you guys this in the next video. So if you guys do enjoy this, please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe. I'll have that Marineford Shanks video out later this week or next week at the latest. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Take care. So today's video, we're going to be talking about one aspect of Shanks. We are going to be talking simply about his arrival at Marineford, and I'm going to explain to you guys in depth why. Take everything else we know about Shanks aside, take away chapter 1, take away his Yonko status, take away everything else about Shanks, just his arrival at Marineford and what it means to the story almost guarantees us, almost 100% guarantees us that he is the strongest. And I'm going to break that down in today's video. So if you guys are ready, let's get into the video. Now, if we look at One Piece, or if we look at manga and shonen manga in general, there always seems to be a pattern in how storytelling works. And even if you are unfamiliar with this pattern, subconsciously you will know about this pattern and you will see it coming based off of just previous experience. So if you've seen enough arcs in anime and in manga, even if you don't know the terms such as arcs or sagas, you will understand this subconsciously just based off of your previous experience, and you would have seen a pattern in how it always works, and you will know, okay, this is how this arc is going to work. And with that, we have, just like I mentioned, we have story arcs and we have story sagas. So a story arc is an extended or continuing storyline in narrative media, such as television, comic books, comic strips, board games, video games, and films. That is the exact definition. And in anime, a story arc would be, in One Piece, for example, a story arc would be Alabasta, would be Dressrosa, would be Wano Kingdom or Wano Country, and stuff like this, or Enies Lobby, Marineford. These would be story arcs. Now, if we look at story sagas, a saga is basically, to define this in my own terms, a story arc is in a saga, and many arcs create a saga. So for example, the Alabasta arc is Alabasta itself. The Alabasta saga is pretty much everything from Reverse Mountain all the way up to Alabasta. And if we look at Reverse Mountain, if we look at Whiskey Peak, if we look at Drum Island, if we look at, forget what it's called, but whatever that island was where they fought Mr. 3 with the candles, and if we look at all of the smaller islands before getting to Alabasta, these aren't just random arcs. These are smaller arcs that lead up, and each of these arcs gives us an extra detail that builds up to Crocodile, builds up Baroque Works, builds up everything. So we keep learning about Baroque Works, we keep learning about the structure of how they work, we keep learning about Crocodile, we get all this lore, and with each arc we build up more and more. And in most cases, these arcs, the main villains in these smaller arcs will tend to be subordinates of the main villain that's saved for the main arc. So for example, Mr. 3 was a main villain in an arc that was a smaller arc in the entirety of the Alabasta saga. And Mr. 3 was a subordinate of Crocodile at that time. Another good example would be Caesar Clown and Doflamingo, Caesar Clown was a subordinate of Doflamingo, and Doflamingo was a subordinate of Kaido. So we keep building up, and through all these arcs, we keep hearing about Kaido. Magellan is a subordinate of the world government system itself. which were the main villains of Marineford, where Impel Down was leading up to Marineford. So the Marineford saga itself would be all of the arcs leading up to Marineford. The Alabasta saga would be all of the arcs leading up to Alabasta, and Wano would be all of the arcs leading up to Wano. So basically, an arc is one arc, and a saga is multiple arcs leading up to one big final arc, and all of it together is one saga. Usually when a saga ends, there tends to be some kind of big breather room where we find out big stuff going on in the world, and we get the Straw Hats goofing around, and we get some kind of major filler arc just to take a big breather before we get into another saga, because they tend to take years to finish. So with this being explained, I want to talk to you guys about the the Summit War Saga, and how, in my opinion, it is not only the best writing in One Piece, but it is, in my opinion, as an entire saga, the best fictional writing I have ever seen. And this is Oda at his absolute peak, and I'm going to explain to you guys why. Now, if we look at the Summit War Saga arc, this arc has been something that has been built up since the actual start of One Piece altogether. And by that I mean, the Summit War Saga concluded, it was pretty much, if we look at everything that happened between Luffy from the beginning of the series, and everything that happened with Blackbeard from the beginning of the series, there was all this tension that slowly kept building and building and building and building, and we were throwing more gas into the fire, with Blackbeard almost capturing Luffy. And then he set out to become a warlord by capturing Luffy, but instead he finds Ace, so he beats Ace, he captures Ace, and all of this stuff, it was leading to an inevitable clash between Blackbeard and Luffy. And that obviously came, even if they didn't directly clash, all hell broke loose, and we saw all of this at the end of Marineford. And because of this, it was the only saga that I can think of in One Piece that has been built up from literally the beginning and was always building. So the way I like to look at it personally, we have our arcs and we have our sagas, but I like to look at it as pre-time skip One Piece in itself is an entire saga. And just like how sagas have little arcs and then they have a main big arc, all of the sagas pre-time skip are little arcs building up to the main arc, which is the main saga, which is the Summit War Saga arc. So pretty much all of the other arcs pre-time skip are the Whiskey Peaks, the Reverse Mountains, the Drum Islands, and then the Summit War Saga is the Alabasta, if that makes sense. That's just how I like to see it in my head canon, because it is the culmination of pretty much everything that happened pre-time skip. So if we look at the Summit War Saga itself has multiple arcs, and these arcs contain Sabaody Archipelago, Amazon Lily, Impel Down, Marineford, and of course the post-war arc. And if we take all of these arcs away, just take them away and put them as individuals separate from the entire story, they are already, almost all of them are some of the best arcs, not just in One Piece, but in manga. However, when you put these together like a puzzle and you put them in chronological order, it is, in my opinion, the best masterpiece we have ever seen. And the whole point of the entire Summer War Saga, everything from Sabaody to the end of the ASL flashback, is to teach us one single point, one lesson through Luffy that is needed to be learned before he can continue the rest of his journey. That lesson is told to us through one single moment, one scene at the end of the 108 long chapter Summit War Saga. And in this scene, it is hammered home 100% what that lesson is, but we're going to get to that scene later. So if we look at One Piece before the Summer War Saga and One Piece during the Summer War Saga, they are almost two different series. So if we look at before the saga, the pattern tends to be Luffy and the Straw Hats get together. There's some kind of issue, there's some kind of problem, there's some kind of big evil bad guy, and Luffy has a little bit of a problem with him, and as it goes on, he starts to struggle more and more with the villains. However, he always seems to be able to get the job done when it counts. Whether it's just being able to dig deep inside, whether it's getting help, whatever it is. We see this with Crocodile being a major obstacle. However, no matter how many times he was able to defeat Luffy, Luffy was always able to just rise back up and get the job done. We never really felt that sense of danger with Crocodile, like where Luffy was done and he could not beat him. And if we look at Enies Lobby, when Nico Robin is captured, the same thing. He was able to get the job done. Dig deep down inside, whatever it takes, get the job done. So there was always this little bit of gloomy, dark tone that gets overrushed right away with Luffy just coming in, fighting, and as long as he is strong enough and as long as he has the spirit, he can get the job done. Now, with the Summit War Saga, this entire pattern just got completely destroyed right off the gate. First arc of the Summit War Saga is the Sabaody Archipelago arc, and in that arc, we see Zoro is already hurt coming into this arc, and this arc starts off quite the opposite of the other arcs, where the other arcs start off with them having to deal with this trouble, and so it's kind of like dark almost right off the beginning, like Skypiea, Alabasta, and you got to figure out how to beat this villain, and then they beat him, and then it's happy, and there's a celebration. So it goes from sad or troublesome to get the job done to celebration. With Sabaody, we start with the celebration, where they come into this pretty much, it's like the Wonderland of One Piece, where they have all this cotton candy, these rides. They have their friends there. They have these creatures. There's these fishmen and whatnot. They're all showing them the place, and it's happy. And we get this little dark tone when we run into the Celestial Dragons real quick, and we get a quick mention of what they're like, and we continue on with the happy-go-lucky moments. And then, boom, everything hits. Luffy punches a Celestial Dragon, and Kizaru comes onto the island. And Kizaru absolutely gives us a rude awakening. Kizaru and Kuma, both. And with that scene with Kuma and Kizaru both just absolutely leaving the Straw Hats hopeless, this was the first time in the entire series that we saw Luffy, the happy-go-lucky guy with the tough spirit who never gives up, completely tell his crew, run. We cannot defeat these guys. And this was unlike anything we've seen before. And the arc itself ends with the absolute most utter defeat that we've seen from the Straw Hats together as an entire crew, to where Kuma, one man, gets rid of all of them and separates them from each other. And Luffy is just on the ground, pounding the ground, crying, wondering why he could not protect his friends, right before he stares Kuma in the face, completely powerless, and gets pushed away himself. And he lands on Amazon Lily. And this pattern that we see here is not just with Sabaody. This pattern continues on throughout the entire Summit War Saga, where that was only the beginning, and neither us nor Luffy knew this at the time, but he was going to go on to face a number of incredible losses coming up, to where we see him lose to Kizaru, we see him getting beat by Blackbeard, he gets beat by Magellan, absolutely gets demolished by Magellan and impaled down, and suffers probably one of his worst losses to date, to where, in my opinion, this was the most serious we have ever seen Luffy close to death, and no one has ever given us that sense of real danger and threat like Magellan did, where we knew Luffy could not touch Magellan, and he needed to get Ace and get out of there quick. And he lost to Magellan. We see him get beat by Kuzan. We see him get beat by Akainu in Marineford. And through all of this, he constantly needs the help of friends, such as he needs the help of Rayleigh, he needs the help of Hancock, he needs the help of Ivankov, he needs the help of Jinbei, Marco, Vista, Kuma, to merely keep him alive against these strong enemies. And this is seen throughout the entire saga, from Amazon Lily, Impel Down, Marineford, Sabaody, all of it. And after so many arcs of Luffy being the bad guys and a happy ending, the stretch from Sabaody to Marineford shows us that Luffy is still a big fish in a very, very, very small pond. And he just only started to experience the ocean. And just like with Zoro in Baratie A and his experience with Mihawk, and how Mihawk tells him, you're a frog in a well, the Summit War Saga was Luffy's frog in a well moment. It was his moment to meet, quote unquote, it was his Mihawk Baratie moment, so to speak, where Zoro got that awakening earlier on in the series. Luffy got that rude awakening in the Summit War Saga. Now, during the Summit War Saga, with Luffy, all Luffy wanted to do, as he stated many times in the saga, is to get stronger. And the reason he wanted to get stronger was to protect his friends that he cared about from stronger foes getting in the way. Guys like Kuma, who got in the way. Guys like Kizaru. Guys like Magellan. The guys like the World Government who took Ace away from him. And because he was unable to do this, he wanted to get stronger so that he can never have to face these challenges again. And if we go back to a flashback in the ASL flashback, a moment there was a scene, one of my favorite scenes, where Garp is talking to Dadan and he is reminiscing about Roger. And he explains to her why he respects Roger personally. And he talks about how Roger was a kind guy, he was a laid back guy, but if you messed with his friends, not only was he willing, but more importantly, he was able to take down anybody and everybody who tried to mess with his friends. And because he was strong enough, no one could ever touch him or his friends. And even if you mess with him, it would not have been as big of a deal as if you mess with the people he cared about. He was always able to protect the people that he cared about most. And if you mess with them, that's when you are going to see the dark side of Goldie Roger. And this is what Garp tells Dadan about Roger, and this is what he remembers the most about him after his death. Now, if we look at Luffy, Luffy keeps getting defeated by all of these guys in the entire saga, and this point was hammered home in two scenes. One of them was in Marineford, and it was one line said by Kizaru. And if one single line summed up the lesson of the Summit War Saga, it was the line that Kizaru said to Luffy, where Luffy was down, he was hurt, he was beat up, he was tired, exhausted, he was weak, and Kizaru just walks up to him almost with a look of pity on his face, and he says, "Courage is not going to be enough. If you really want to make a stand in this world, and if you really want to protect the people that you care about, you're going to have to become much, much stronger." And then he just kicks him miles away to where Whitebeard catches him. And that right there is the lesson for Luffy to learn in this entire saga. And this is what we keep seeing Luffy fail at for the first time, and he does it over and over and over again in this saga, where it's unlike anything else we have ever seen. Now, simultaneously, in the exact same time, if we look at a different character's perspective, let's look at Koby. Koby, during the Marineford saga, is having a lot of internal struggle, just like Garp, but in his own separate way. So we see Koby, first he has a little bit of, a little bit of fear, and he's not sure if he wants to participate. He stands behind the wall, he sees Akainu kill a soldier, he's like, okay, I'm going to fight. Him and Helmeppo are there. They are very loyal to the world government and to the Marines. They believe they are fighting for the right cause, and they are willing to fight if necessary. We even know he is willing to fight and capture Luffy if necessary. And this all goes well and all until Whitebeard is dead, Ace is dead, and the fight continues. And Koby sees Marines continue to get more and more aggressive. Rather than laying back and settling for their win, they get even more aggressive and they pursue even more. And this charge is led by Akainu as well as Kizaru and other admirals, but the hunger just becomes more and more. And with this, unfortunately, Koby has to see more and more of his allies and his respected peers in the world government and the Marines fall. And he can't help but to see all of these fathers and husbands and friends and brothers and sons dying around him in absolute vain for absolutely no necessary reason, because the fight is already over. And Koby, being the good-hearted character that he is, this hurts him deep inside. And Koby has never been a courageous character. We obviously see this from the very moment we see him with Luffy. But in this moment, Koby finally summons the courage that he needs to speak loud and to let his voice be heard. And he stands in front of an admiral, and he, although emotional and although screaming, he explains in the most logical way and in the most reasonable way that makes absolute perfect sense why, as the Marines, they should stop fighting this war. And even though everything he is saying makes perfect logical sense and would even benefit the Marines because they would save a lot of their own soldiers and they are dying for no reason, we see that he is met with no one caring about what he has to say. During the ASL flashback with Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, there was a very important scene where after Sabo's death and Ace discovers Sabo's death, he tries to run outside of the house, grab a pipe, and try and fight the people who quote-unquote killed Sabo. And Dadan takes his head and smashes it into the ground. And she brings a very good point here. And what she says here stands tall for the entire saga. Especially hits home with Koby here in this part. And she says that until you are strong, your voice does not matter. Until you are strong enough to do something about it, you don't have a voice and you don't get to do anything except sit back and accept it. And this was Koby in Marineford in a nutshell. Just like Ace and how he was helpless to do anything about the death of Sabo, Koby, surrounded by the death and the bodies of all his comrades, because he was weak, just like Ace then, was unable to do anything about it. And just like Dadan said to Ace, because he was weak, his voice would always fall on deaf ears until he was strong enough to do something about it. His words fall on absolute deaf ears, and Akainu, after standing there for about 5 seconds listening to him, is ready to kill him, punch him, and literally get right on with what he was doing, like nothing happened. And in this moment, he is stopped by one man. He is stopped by Shanks. And right then and there, Oda, after showing us Luffy and Koby and the changes they wanted to make, threw in one character right then and there that represented both in its highest form. A character that embodied both what Luffy needed to become and what Koby needed to desperately become, all in one. A character who does not lust for battle like most, but he is strong enough to stop virtually anybody who gets in his way and tries to mess with his friends and the people who he cares about. And without needing to even fight, through simply being strong enough and with the world knowing how strong he is able to protect those he cares about without even shedding a single drop of blood. And this is Luffy's #1 reason for becoming stronger. This same character also shows us that mere seconds after Koby attempted to stop the war by standing in front of an admiral and explaining with a pure, logical, and good explanation why they should stop the war, was absolutely not listened to and was met with almost death. This character comes in, pretty much says verbatim, almost word for word, exactly what Koby said, but makes one simple difference and one change that Koby did not do. And what does he do? He pulls out his sword at the end of his explanation and says, fine. And if any of you still want to fight after what I just said, come and fight me. With him and his crew standing behind him, decked out, weapons up, ready to fight. And this is the difference. This is what Koby lacked. And this is what Shanks said. And because of this one thing, not because of the explanation he gave, that Koby gave, but because he was willing and able to back it up with his strength right then and there, he was respected by everybody, he was listened to, and nobody dared fight him. And because of that, he was able to stop the war. And through this, we understand that he is also the embodiment of Koby's #1 reason to get stronger. And in this one single appearance, by this one simple character, we are able to see why Luffy and Koby both need a time skip training arc. And more importantly, we see how the world will view them if they can get stronger. In the world of One Piece, just like in our real life world, respect comes through strength, plain and simple, above all else. And if Luffy and Koby can get stronger, they can be seen just how this character was seen and command the respect of everybody, just like he did. What we see here from Shanks is the embodiment of everything that represents what Luffy wants to become and everything that represents what Koby needs to become, all in one. So everything we see from Luffy in the Summit War Saga that he knows he is lacking, and everything we see from Koby that he knows he is lacking in Marineford, they all appear in one simple figure in 1 or 2 chapters in one character, and that is Shanks. And another very important detail that needs to be pointed out here in regards to Shanks, if we look at an SBS, in one of the SBSs, this is canon, this is confirmed canon, it is said that, word for word, I quote, "Red hair created countless legends. Contrary to his stature, there are no pirates free like him. If we define the Pirate King as the most freest person in the seas, then we can say that Shanks is the closest to that position." So this tells us 2 things. First, as it says clearly, this tells us that with this definition, Shanks is the closest to Pirate King. But what this also tells us, And I'm gonna have to take you guys back to another moment here to fully understand this. If we look back at a scene in Sabaody Archipelago where Rayleigh is drinking in his bar and talking to the Straw Hats for the first time and pretty much answering all their questions and telling them everything they need to know, there is one moment here where he looks Luffy dead in the eye and he asks Luffy, I forget exactly what he asked him. I think he asked him, do you really want to conquer the seas that bad? Where it's pretty much a trick question, it's a test. And after a long brief moment of silence with the two just dead staring at each other, Luffy says to him, I am not going to conquer anything. The one who is the most free is the Pirate King. And Rayleigh smiles and he sees Roger and Luffy, pretty much telling us that this is exactly what Roger said as well. And with this, we get pretty much confirmation that Luffy's #1 goal in the entire series, that he says at the end of every single episode, that he says over and over and over again, he wants to become Pirate King. My name is Monkey D. Luffy and I will become Pirate King. His #1 and his sole purpose for becoming Pirate King is only so that he can become the freest man in the seas, the freest person in the seas. And because Rayleigh saw Roger through this, we can only assume that Roger's reason for this as well was to become the freest man in the seas. So their main goal for becoming King of the Pirates was to be the freest person in the seas. That is Luffy's end goal. That is what he wants more than anything. And again, we look back at this SBS and it tells us that Shanks is the current freest person in the seas. And if we look at One Piece, we always see him hanging out, having fun in different islands, doing whatever he wants, wherever he wants, with whoever he wants, and he is always having a good time. And no one seems to be able to get in his way or be an obstacle in his path or to trouble him. And if they are, he stands up. And whenever he stands up to this, he gets his way. We see this with the bandits. We see this with Marineford. We see this with Kaido trying to arrive to Marineford. He always gets his way whenever he wants. And when he's not involved, he's having a good time, partying, relaxing. Tell me this is not Luffy at the end of the series in a nutshell. Again, Luffy wants to become Pirate King in order to be the freest man. Shanks already is the freest man. And we know he doesn't want to become Pirate King, otherwise he would have become Pirate King at a much younger age. So this right here tells us a lot about Shanks as well. In one of my favorite scenes in the entire story of One Piece, probably my top 5 favorite scenes, honestly. This scene is in the end of the entire Summit War Saga. In the final arc, the post-war arc, in one of the final moments in this arc. We see Ace and Luffy standing facing the sea on top of the hill, crying about the death of Sabo. And Ace hits Luffy and he tells Luffy that he is never gonna die, so don't worry about losing him. And Luffy starts to cry and he breaks down and he says, and again, this is Oda after an entire Summit War Saga of dedicating it to this entire point. One last final time, he wants to absolutely hammer this point home as clear as he possibly can. And he does this by Luffy crying and saying he wants to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and even stronger than that, so that he never has to lose anybody he cares about ever again. This is what Roger was, and this is why he went to war for his crew. And as we see with Garp talking to Dadan about Roger, even though he was probably one of his most formidable foes, Garp was able to respect and admire this one trait about Roger. And this is what Shanks shows us all in one single appearance, his most important appearance in the entire story. Who represents that figure today? Red-haired Shanks. So that's going to be the video for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's very much appreciated. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. Help me reach 100 subscribers. Leave a like if you liked it. Comment down below if you agree or if you disagree with Shanks being top 1. And with that, I'll see you guys later on this week with another banger video. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon.